Dear viewers, welcome to Tell It As It Is TV. We'll be bringing you ancient and modern true life stories with graphic images.
Please note that characters and some environs are fictional.
Who could this young man be? Why did he try to end his life? Could he be dead or alive? All the details await our viewers in this true but sad story. Please watch and learn. The sterile scent of the hospital ward hung heavily in the air as Michael lay on the bed. Mentally weak and emotionally bruised from the suicidal attempt. The world outside seemed so distant, a blur of noise and movement that he no longer cared for. He loved her. He had given her everything, and in return, she had left him without warning, without mercy. His heart shattered and cold, had no place left for hope. It was the loneliness that had driven him to this point. The overwhelming belief that there was no way forward. His mind was a storm of dark thoughts. But as the hours passed in the dim lit room, a quiet presence appeared by his side. An older woman, her face worn with age and wisdom, stood just within his line of sight. She was in the hospital's cleaning staff uniform, a simple blue apron covering her modest clothes. She didn't seem to care that Michael hadn't acknowledged her. She swept the floor, humming softly to herself, as though there was no place in the world that could steal her peace. Eventually, she stopped, placing her mop against the wall. She didn't ask for permission to sit, but did so anyway, folding her hands in her lap as she looked at him. "Why?" she asked, her voice kind but unwavering. Michael didn't respond. He wasn't sure he could speak. What was the point? His eyes were empty. The wall dimmed a faint grey. But the woman was patient. She waited. After a long moment, Michael let out a bitter laugh, almost mocking himself. What's the point? I've lost everything. Everyone leaves anyway. The woman didn't flinch at his words. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her expression softening. "You think that's the worst thing that can happen to you?" she asked, her voice gentle but laced with something stronger. "You think that's the end?" Michael looked at her, irritated. How could she understand anything? She didn't know what it was like to feel completely abandoned. But the woman wasn't deterred. She sat forward, her hands clasped together now, her face turning a little more serious. "You might be surprised," she paused, as if weighing on the gravity of what she was about to share, before she spoke again. "I was once married to a man I loved very much. He was wealthy and we had everything. But life, as it always does, has a way of changing. When my husband passed, his family threw me out. Just like that, I was left with nothing but my son, Jaden. And he was everything. I would have done anything to keep him safe, to give him a future." She sighed, a weight in her eyes as she continued, her voice quiet now, distant as she remembered. "We lived on the streets of Lagos for a time, Michael. I had to beg for food, sell sachet water in Lagos traffic, work with men on a building site, mixing sand with cement, carrying blocks, and mounting the stairs. I took up any job I could, from washing dishes to cleaning homes, just so my son wouldn't starve. But it didn't matter what I wanted. I couldn't stop the world from turning its back on us. And then one day, my son got a scholarship to study abroad, as he was very brilliant. I was proud, but I was also afraid. I knew it would be years before I would see him again. Her face hardened, but only for a second before it softened again. After he finished school and got a good job, he was finally coming home on the second day of September 1988. I was so happy. I waited for him at the airport. But the unimaginable happened, as my joy was short-lived. The plane crashed into Atlantic Ocean, killing all 229 passengers and crew on board. The widow took a deep breath as Michael blinked, his chest tightening. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected her to be so open, so honest. You see, she continued, her eyes meeting his, I lost everything, but I never thought about ending it. I just kept going, because life doesn't give us a choice sometimes. We keep moving forward, or we break. Her eyes searched his face, waiting for him to understand. The silence stretched out, heavy and full of meaning. Michael looked at her, his heart aching in ways it hadn't before. She was telling him about loss, about survival, about strength. After a long pause, he finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. I thought I had it bad, but you are so strong. I don't know if I could survive what you went through. The woman smiled softly. I didn't have a choice, and neither do you. He felt a strange weight lifting from his chest, the numbness beginning to melt away. He wasn't sure when it happened, but something inside him clicked. His pain was still there, but now it was part of a bigger story, one that hadn't ended yet. I think I understand, Michael said quietly, his voice cracking, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't alone. As the days passed, Michael found himself returning to the same hospital room, not as the broken young man he once was, but as someone who had begun to heal. The widow, whose name he knew now was Grace, Jaden's mother, had become his uncle, but he chose to call her mother as a sign of respect. Grace is old enough to be Michael's mother. If Jaden was to be alive, they would be almost age mates. Above all, Michael is an orphan. Why can't he take this angelic woman who has given him hope and a therapy he never paid for as a mother? She had encouraged him that there is always something to live for. She would visit him every day, sitting beside him, not out of pity, but out of genuine care. Her presence was constant, steady, like quiet rhythm of the tides. Eventually, Michael left the hospital, his body slowly mending, but his heart was still in need of repair. He had nowhere to go, no family, no home. But Mama Grace had already made up her mind. She welcomed him into her small, modest apartment. It wasn't much, but to Michael, it was everything. They didn't need to speak much. The bond between them had already been forged in the silence of shared pain and resilience. Grace taught him how to cook simple meals, how to smile again, and how to find beauty in the everyday moments that most people took for granted. In return, Michael helped her with house chores, carrying the groceries she brought home and fixing things around the apartment, small tasks that brought a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Over time, the house was filled with laughter, something Michael hadn't heard in so long. They grew into their new roles, like two puzzle pieces fitting perfectly together. He became the son she had lost, and she became the mother he never knew he needed. Years passed, and life wasn't perfect, but together they made it beautiful. Michael found a job at a small printing company, and though it wasn't glamorous, it gave him pride. And Grace, she continued to work at the hospital, doing the same menial jobs, but with a smile on her face. They had no grand riches, no lofty dreams of wealth or fame, but what they did have was something that couldn't be bought. A bond forged through the trials of life and the healing power of love. In the end, it wasn't about the tragedies they had endured or the scars they carried. It was about the new beginning they had given each other. It was about finding a family, not in blood, but in kindness and companion. And so they lived happily ever after. Not because life was easy, but because together they made it worth living.
The moral of the story is that resilience and compassion can heal even the deepest wounds. No matter how hard life gets, there's always a chance for a new beginning. It is through unexpected connections, like the one between Michael and Grace, that we find the strength to move forward. Sometimes, the family we need isn't the one we're born into, it's the one we create through kindness, understanding, and support. Please subscribe, comment, like and share.